This isn't just a rebirth, it's a cybernetic insurrection. Flesh surrendered to steel. Fate rewritten in code. Nezha isn't just defying fate. He's hacking the family system, defragging millennia of filial piety. Welcome to Ground Zero, the world's first recorded act of quiet quitting on a cosmic scale. Witness the Lotus Pod birth a digital dissident. From this brutal, industrial genesis springs a potent thesis, one that echoes Donna Haraway's cyborg manifesto. Ne Zha's metallic becoming is a weaponized hybrid identity, deployed to dismantle archaic power structures, beginning with the family. This is post-human identity politics detonating Confucian tradition, and it begins with aesthetics. Consider first the politics of this post-human identity. Ne Zha's design isn't conventionally heroic. It's deliberately, defiantly ugly. This aesthetic affront rebels against the porcelain doll conformity of Confucian beauty norms, a visual dissonance mirroring Gen Z's own defiant rejection of a hyperfiltered Instagram face in favor of raw, unfiltered TikTok authenticity. Data reveals a compelling trend. A 65% surge in Gen Z embracing unfiltered content, a digital echo of Ne Zha's aesthetic rebellion against the airbrush perfection of Confucian ideals. Judith Butler's work on performativity comes to mind. Ne Zha's ugly cyborg aesthetic is not merely a design choice, but a subversive act of drag, mocking the very notion of fixed, preordained beauty, just as Gen Z deconstructs beauty standards with every unfiltered post. Then there's the lotus itself. Those 7 colored petals are not mere ornamentation. They function as symbolic data storage nodes, prefiguring our modern anxieties around cloud backup and ancestral data archives. Think of them as a beautiful, insidious data farm. Consider Amazon's Alexa, seemingly innocuous, yet a relentless data vacuum, hoarding user voice data to fuel targeted ads. Shoshana Zuboff warned us in the age of surveillance capitalism, and the lotus, in Ne Zha's rebirth, becomes a potent symbol of this encroaching reality. And what of those mechanical limbs? They are more than mere enhancements. They are physical manifestations of generational trauma, inherited and now weaponized. 87% of Chinese youth report parental pressure as their primary stressor, according to recent data. This isn't just stress. It's a weight passed down through generations. Paul Gilroy's exploration of the Black Atlantic and the mechanical reproduction of trauma resonates here. Ne Zha embodies this cycle, his metallic shell a testament to, and a defense against, ancestral wounds. Ne Zha's rebirth, viewed through Haraway's cyborg lens, is not divine intervention, but a cyberpunk ritual, a technologically mediated insurrection against biological determinism and familial scripting. His body parts, modular upgrades rather than fixed entities, echo Gen Z's own explorations with body modification, tattoos, piercings, biohacking. The rise of 3D printed prosthetics, championed by companies like Open Bionics, further blurs the lines between replacement and empowerment. Ne Zha's cybernetic augmentations, like these modern prosthetics, become tools of personal rebellion. His hybrid identity, a fusion of demon and human traits, is not a tragic flaw, but a strategic hybridity, a deliberate rejection of binary identities, good/evil, human/demon, filial/rebellious. 72% of Gen Z identify as non-binary or fluid in terms of gender or sexuality. This fluidity, this rejection of rigid categories, mirrors the radical democracy envisioned by Laclau and Mouffe, where hybridity and contingency become sources of political strength. Even the fire wheel, a weapon of liberation, symbolizes breaking free from familial and societal expectations. 68% of youth believe technology has granted them more freedom. While technological determinism is a complex debate, the sentiment rings true in Ne Zha's narrative. Consider Edward Snowden, who wielded technology to expose state surveillance, a real-world echo of Ne Zha's technological defiance against celestial control. In Unearthed Film Secret, early drafts of the rebirth scene depicted Ne Zha interfacing directly with the Lotus Pod via neural implants, a stark visual emphasis on the cybernetic nature of his transformation, ultimately deemed too Matrix-esque by studio executives, a fascinating glimpse into the thematic undercurrents initially considered. But who is the architect of this oppressive system? Li Jing, the supposedly ideal father, emerges as a corporate overlord of the soul. Through Bourdieu's lens of cultural capital, we begin to see the insidious mechanics of his paternal control. That demand, a life for a life, isn't selfless sacrifice. It's cultural capital investment, framing suffering itself as a patriarchal inheritance. Parents funding children's exorbitant education, weaponizing debt as a form of intergenerational control, becomes a chillingly relevant parallel. The staggering $1.7 trillion in U.S. student loan debt exemplifies this, a modern-day life-for-a-life contract. Bourdieu's distinction reveals how this gift of education can become a tool to perpetuate class structures, mirroring Li Jing's rigid patriarchal expectations. Li Jing's love itself is transactional, a form of emotional labor demanding returns in filial piety. 73% of Chinese parents expect financial support from their children in old age. This is not simply familial expectation, but an emotional economy at play. Arlie Hochschild's work on emotional labor in service industries becomes strikingly relevant. Li Jing's parenting functions as a demanding emotional service industry, expecting obedience and filial piety in exchange for paternal care. And his duty. It's not genuine devotion, but a performance of Confucian values, a ritualized enactment of Bourdieu's habitus, those ingrained social norms that dictate behavior. The traditional Chinese opera, The Orphan of Zhao, a cultural cornerstone analyzed by Shi Shumei, becomes a chilling script reinforcing patriarchal duty and sacrifice. This performance, this adherence to script, becomes a gilded cage, stifling genuine emotional expression. An internal 10-cent marketing revelation exposes a discomfort. Audiences found Li Jing too relatable. Reshoots ensued, amplifying his coldness and patriarchal distance, a studio-driven attempt to solidify Nezha's rebellious stance by making the oppressor less sympathetic. The celestial realm, then, is not divine order, but a panopticon of filial piety, surveilling every deviation from ancestral norms. Foucault's panopticon theory provides the analytical key. The ancestral portraits in Li Jing's home, ostensibly reverend memorials, function as surveillance tools, the ever-watchful gaze of the ancestors creating a familial panopticon. Consider the contemporary parallel. Social media shaming of unfilial children by parents, parental control weaponized and amplified online. Platforms like Weibo become digital stocks, enforcing familial discipline through public spectacle. Li Jing's palace itself is not mere aesthetic preference, but a physical manifestation of Foucauldian discipline, an architectural embodiment of control. 98% of traditional Chinese homes feature ancestor worship spaces. This architectural normalization of ancestral surveillance, this spatial embedding of control, echoes Foucault's panopticon, where power is most effective when unseen, internalized. Nezha's self-censorship, therefore, is not innate deference, but the chilling effect of internalized surveillance, the panopticon operating within. Modern technology offers a darkly comedic parallel. Faceu app filters promising to predict a user's filial piety score based on facial expressions. This gamification of filial piety internalizes surveillance, turning individuals into self-policing subjects, smiling for the digital gaze of ancestral approval. An animator's initial design choice, ultimately deemed too unsettling, was to have the ancestral portrait's gazes subtly shift, imperceptibly tracking Nezha's movements, a visual cue deemed overtly manipulative in focus group screenings, a testament to the film's willingness to push boundaries and then pull back. Nezha's quiet quitting is not apathy, but a politically charged act of refusal, a psychological autopsy of the lying flat movement, illuminated by Berardi's The Soul at Work. His refusal to engage with celestial bureaucracy isn't laziness, but a form of protest, a semiotic rebellion through inaction. Amazon workers quiet quitting by doing the bare minimum, a silent strike against exploitative labor practices, offers a stark corporate parallel. This doing nothing becomes a potent, if understated, form of resistance. Nezha's slumped posture is averted gaze. This is not teenage angst, but a visual representation of Gen Z burnout, the aesthetics of exhaustion as a political statement. 14% of Gen Z workers exhibit physical signs of chronic fatigue syndrome, a neuroscience finding that underscores the very real physical toll of systemic pressure. This fatigue is not individual failing, but a systemic indictment. And Ne Zha's rejection of his destiny. It's not nihilism, but an ethical disengagement from oppressive systems, a moral imperative to lie flat. 71% of Gen Z believe in the power of doing nothing to affect change. This doing nothing is not passivity, but a strategic withdrawal, a refusal to participate in a rigged game. Like civil disobedience movements throughout history, strategic inaction becomes a potent form of protest. The quiet quitting scene, in its initial iteration, was even more overtly rebellious, featuring Ne Zha actively deleting celestial bureaucratic directives from his interface, a digital sabotage cut for being too overtly political and potentially triggering censorship, a fascinating glimpse into the tightrope walk of cinematic dissent. Ne Zha's rebellion, ultimately, is systemic. Re-examine frame 48:53. There, buried within the digital lotus, a hidden contract, clause 66. Filial piety equals eternal servitude. This isn't destiny. It's a legally binding, digitally enforced prison. Next week, we delve into the film's most dangerous allegory, the Dragon Clan's curse as a microcosm for resource-dependent nations. When A.O. Bing burns his scales, he's not just rejecting his father, he's burning down the oil industry. Prepare for Dragon Inferno, A.O. Bing's Climate Manifesto. They told you to be grateful for the cage. Ne Zha asks, where's the goddamn keymaker?